Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Dr. Jeff C. May. Welcome to another episode of Doctor's Orders, advice you should actually take. And listen, in this episode, I'm going to explain exactly why I am so sick, literally almost sick to my stomach, of a healthcare, quote unquote, if you can't see me, I'm doing air quotes right now, of a healthcare system that spends trillions and trillions of dollars every single year. Trillions. Like, we can never comprehend how much money that is only for Americans, your family, my family, our kids, their kids, the next generation, the unborn, coming into a system that only gets worse results every year. Yet we spend more and more every year. There's nowhere else. There's really nowhere else where we continue to spend, and get worse, worse, worse. Unless you look at the cause, unless you look back at it. And the question that comes up is, does healthcare really want you to get healthier? Now, I say healthcare. In previous episodes, I talked about the sick care system, and that's really what it is. So traditionally, sick care was meant for acute conditions, which just means like, hey, what just happened now? Bam, I got hit by a bus. Go to the doctor. Like, for crying out loud, go to the doctor. The best in the world with acute care. But yet over 80% of visits nowadays, over 80% of visits going into quote unquote your regular doctor, primary care, the hospital, the minute clinic, wherever it may be, are for chronic lifestyle conditions. And so this is the episode where we want to start helping you win and start drowning out the whining. It is literally winning over whining and explaining how you do that, because you see, outputs are what we want. Anytime you hear me say outputs in this episode, I'm going to talk about results, the results in your life, and that's what people want. And we're going to understand, hey, what drives outputs? We're going to talk about the three main inputs that drive outputs in your life and how you can impact those inputs. I promise you this. The good news is you have more control over the inputs in your life than you could ever imagine to produce better outputs, aka good things in, good things out, bad things in, bad things out. And that's what we get to talk about as we go through this. And we're going to blow away the status quo, because they profit when you pop pills. They profit when you're popping pills. And we live in this society where we forget that pain is part of the process. And I'm going to say that again. Pain is part of the process. You see how many medications are out there, how many strategies and health coaches or gurus or whatever it may be, therapists and all alike. And not saying these are bad people. These are not bad people. This isn't a judgment. This is saying they are all designed for you never to feel pain, for you to just go through life comfortable. And I want to tell you that we are trained and we have been bought and sold the lie to be comfortable in life. And I'm here to tell you today, guess what? Being uncomfortable is where you grow. Being uncomfortable is part of making a difference and living a life that has some stories to tell. I'm going to give you my own opinion on this. Take it or leave it. But I want to be the old man. Lord willing, I get to a ripe old age, maybe even 100. See, I'm not afraid of being 100, because if I get there, it's God's will. And say I'm 100 years old. The one thing I want is just a bunch of badass stories. I want so many badass stories to tell, whoever will listen at that point. Maybe my great grandkids, who know, what a wild thought. What if they listen to this one day and be like, well, great grandpa was right. He's got some pretty crazy hairball epic stories to tell of life being lived. And that's when it comes down to winning over whining. That's what I want for every single one of my patients, every single person that I have the gift to impact their lives in some way. Like everybody listening to this, whether it's one or a million, making an impact on life should not be taken lightly. And Prefontaine said this quote. He said, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And that's a quote. I was on a run yesterday and I heard it. I was listening to a podcast and I heard that quote, and man, I was like, man, anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And so coming into today's episode, I had more energy. I'm like, man, we got to be able to impact people on this. And so here's what I want to do. I want to go through inputs versus outputs, because how do you get better results when it comes to your health? And first, this concept, and this one's going to be, probably less of the sciencey, geeky kind of stuff, but I understand that the sciencey, geeky stuff got me here to put it in a way where we can just put it into use. And ultimately, it doesn't know if you know how to spell, DNA, right? Or maybe you do know how to spell DNA. But no, what I'm talking about is like, it's not about the big long words or epigenetics or the genetic code or all of those aspects. We don't want to get lost in the weeds. What we do want to get lost in is saying, I have a relentless focus on having better inputs in my life so I can get better outputs. So what are the three main inputs? I'm going to keep this simple. There's three main inputs to your life and how your body is going to want to run and function. Okay? There's physical inputs, there's chemical inputs, and there's mental inputs. Okay? Physical, chemical, and mental, aka emotional. So there's three inputs that we have. And these are the things, like I'm saying, what's going to happen to you if you sit every night and listen to the news? What kind of input is that? Okay, because that's an input mentally. Like you're sitting there, and the analogy was always this: if you were to sit there and listen to the news nowadays, by the way, is garbage. Shout out to Tracy, one of our awesome patients. We were talking about this the other day. The news has become this clickbaity, trying to get more eyeballs, more outrageous. The stories on the news are absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I even saw a headline the other day on why lower gas prices is a bad thing. Are you kidding me? Like think about this. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. There's always going to be someone that wants you to click on it and read it because that's how they get paid. And so ultimately, they've sunk to this lowest level. The mainstream media, the mainstream media has lowered themselves to a level of like, let's just put out our outrageous titles and we've got to outdo the next station and try and get more eyeballs because everybody's job is on the line. And so now you have this thing. Say you're at this analogy is you're preparing dinner for friends. And the friends come over and you have kids there and they're hanging out and let's say they're younger kids and they're all hanging out. And while you're waiting for dinner is your friend says, hey, do you mind if I watch the news? And I already messed it up. Okay, they're not watching the news. Okay, I'm not perfect, everybody. But let's say instead of watching the news, they actually start talking to your kids about drugs, murder, and sex. Yes, I said it. Drugs, murder, and sex. All of a sudden, they're talking to your young kids about this, and you're like, hold the phone, like, get out. Like, you wouldn't allow that to just play in the background. But yet, you probably figure out the analogy because of my awesome speaking skills, and I'm a quote-unquote professional podcaster. That's what's happening when you have the news on. So this news is constantly feeding this thing into your home of bad news. So if you got that negative input mentally, what do you think the mental output is going to be? You see, if you put a tomato seed in the ground and a corn plant comes out of the ground, based on you planting a tomato seed, guess what? It wasn't a tomato seed. You see, input drives output. Your outward expression of health is a reflection of your inward inputs into your health system. Now, I could go on and on about this, but let's hit on the other two. Physical. You sit every day. Listen, sitting's the new fentanyl. You might as well just say, I want my spine and my nervous system to degenerate faster. I want to lose muscle tone. I'd rather not have energy, and I'd rather be stiff, sore, and chronically inflamed. The amount that people sit. You see, sitting is an input. It's a physical input. And it's literally a scarcity of mobility that you need. Mobility is almost like a vitamin. Mobility is almost like breathing. In fact, mobility is just as important as other life functions if you want to function with a lot of life. And when you look at this physical input, that's just one example. You can go through your life and you can think about these things. So we hit mental, we hit physical. What about chemical? So chemical covers the basis of nutrition. Chemical inputs. So you either have enough of the good things or a deficiency of the good things, or you have a sufficiency of the toxic things and a deficiency where you need it the most. For example, whether it's hydration, when you look at hydration, breathing exercises, these chemical inputs, but what we usually have a toxicity of is carbs, sugars, all the garbage, like these coffees that cost $9 to $10. $9 to $10 for these coffees that are full of just absolute toxic garbage for your gut, let alone the seed oils that we're eating, the food dyes, and everything in between. In fact, one thing that gets me fired up, especially when we talk about this chemical input, is same thing. I was running last night, and I was running through this little small town close to where I live. And in a small town, I don't know if you grew up in a small town. I grew up in a small town, and there's all these little bars, and it's kind of like the hangout. Like last night happened to be a Tuesday, and I'm running. And lo and behold, coming across a crosswalk was a gal that I didn't know, and then a former patient. Now, I'm not going to name names. I'm not trying to judge here, but I know this former patient actually quit care in our office several years ago because they were struggling, and that sucks. Like that sucks. I have empathy for that. But what I don't have empathy for is that when you're strutting across the crosswalk, headed into bar, which you're probably going to be drinking, adding more chemical toxins, and you're smoking a cigarette, which at the end of the day, okay, you're smoking. Nothing good comes from you smoking, but it's freaking expensive. Like, it's freaking expensive. The amount of money that's spent on cigarettes to kill you faster is absolutely ridiculous. So if you're maybe listening to this and you're like, man, I really want to quit smoking, you need to email me because or contact the office or whatever it is. I've got a slick trick for quitting smoking, let alone doing the math. Actually, you want to just do the math right now? Do the math on what it's costing you to kill yourself with cigarettes. There's no benefit. There is no benefit to smoking at all. And so I had a really hard time. And so I said, hey, so-and-so, and I called the patient by their name. And I asked them, how it's doing as I'm running by. And they're like, oh, I'm hanging in there. And all I could think to say was, don't let go. I literally turned and said, I was like, don't let go. Even though in a way she's not hanging in there. She's actually, it's almost like she's as a cliffhanger and she's got a backpack on and she's asking people to put more rocks in her backpack. Like, she's making it harder for herself. I digress. That's a chemical input. So remember, inputs control outputs. I want you at the end of this episode to be going through and saying, hey, take an inventory of your inputs. Are they helping you or are they hurting you? And have the courage to freaking quit the ones that are hurting you. Have the courage. Have the courage. You are worth it. If you've got to look at your kids' pictures, look at your grandbabies or whatever it is, find a big why and freaking drop the crap that's hurting you. Plain and simple. And by the way, the second point of today's episode is pain is part of the process. Pain is part of progress. Stop looking to eliminate pain because there's certain pains you got to go through to break habits. And I encourage you, I welcome that pain for any one of you, including myself, that's going to push progress. There is a certain amount of pain that comes with progress. And I don't want my kids to get sheltered from that or shielded from that. I want them to face that pain if it's going to help them. So Lord, if there's a pain that my kids need to go through to learn a lesson, let them have it and let us celebrate at the end. And that's a concept that doesn't get talked about in America because we're too vanilla powdered milk toast soft. Like, we're just freaking marshmallow soft. And that's going to realize that's going to produce things harder. We always want things the easy way. And then when things get hard, we get just absolutely knocked off our feet. You need to do the hard things now and make life easier later. And if it's not easier, you need to understand that going through those hard things made you stronger and you're able to adapt better. That's what it's all about. And finally, in this third point, as I'm hitting you guys with some fire today, it's going to, all these things, the inputs and outputs, and understanding that pain is part of progress. All of those things are going to help you be in the winning column versus the whining column. We all know those people who are the Eeyores. They're constantly whining. Everything happens to them. They're the victim mentality, and that victim mentality is so freaking contagious. I'm more conscious of being around victims and getting the heck out of there, like eliminating the victim mentality in and around my life. I'm more cautious of that than any of the COVID BS that they tried to throw at us, right? COVID ended up being no more than the cold and the flu. Yeah, people died. I get that. That really, really sucks. But realize that the people who died or had multiple comorbidities and all of these things. Like, the stats are out on it now. I'm not some conspiracy theory like wacko now that all the facts are coming out. These are things that we talked about 2021, 2022. So let's not make this about COVID. Let's make this about you understanding I want you to win and not whine. The more winning you do, the less whining you hear. The more winning you have in your life, the less whining you hear outside of your life. And so ultimately, here's what I want you to do. Take an inventory of your inputs. Figure out, hey, is this one helping or hurting? Have the courage to eliminate it. Remember, pain is part of the progress, and pain is part of the process. Don't shy away from the pain. And pretty soon, you are going to be in that winning column, not even being able to hear the whining. In fact, you're going to be winning so big you can't hear the whining around you. Hey guys, those are your doctor's orders for this week. Until next week, remember, life's better when you're well adjusted. We'll talk soon.